Hey everyone, let's jump right in. So, we literally hear the term plant-based everywhere right now, right? From your local grocery store aisles to fast food menus, it is everywhere. But honestly, parsing out the actual science from the slick marketing can be pretty tough. So today, we're digging deep into a massive, highly comprehensive review from the World Health Organization to see how plant-based diets actually impact our bodies, our societies, and ultimately our planet.
Which brings us to a really crucial question to kick things off. Are all plant-based diets actually good for you? You know, there's this popular cultural assumption that simply slapping a green plant-based label on a food automatically makes it a healthy choice. But as we'll see from the data today, the reality is a whole lot more nuanced and, frankly, a lot more interesting than that.
Here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to quickly hit defining plant-based diets, preventing chronic diseases, minding the nutrient gaps, the ultra-processed food trap, planetary and economic benefits, and finally, how to make the shift.
All right, let's dive into Section 1, defining plant-based diets and understanding the spectrum.
If we really want to de-jargonize this space, we have to look closely at what the WHO actually means by this term. Notice the phrasing here: lower consumption or exclusion. The absolutely crucial point is that plant-based is just a broad umbrella term. It is not some rigid rule demanding the total, absolute elimination of all animal products. Things like vegetarianism and veganism, they're actually just subsets living beneath this much larger plant-based umbrella.
Think of it like a sliding scale. The vegetarian spectrum ranges pretty widely. On one end, you've got semi-vegetarian or flexitarian diets, which are primarily plants but still occasionally include meat, poultry, or fish. Then you have the pesco-vegetarian diet, meaning fish, dairy, and eggs are on the menu. Moving further along, you see lacto-ovo-vegetarians who just eat dairy and eggs, all the way down to strict vegan diets which omit all animal products entirely, sometimes right down to the honey. So it's a highly flexible spectrum.
Moving right along to Section 2, preventing chronic diseases and the health impact. When we look at the real-world health impacts, this number right here is just staggering: 71%. That is the percentage of all premature deaths globally caused by non-communicable diseases, or NCDs. We are talking about 41 million deaths every single year. In the WHO European region alone, these diseases account for almost 90% of all deaths. It's wild. And it highlights exactly why a population-wide diet shift matters so much for all of us.
So how do plants actually help? Well, the WHO evidence shows that shifting to a predominantly plant-based diet offers immense protection. High fruit and vegetable intake significantly lowers the risk of heart disease and stroke. The data also clearly shows that frequent consumption of red and processed meats increases the risk of bowel cancer, while vegetarians and vegans generally see a lower risk for all cancers overall. Plus, because vegetarians typically have a lower body mass index, or BMI, they have a remarkably lower risk of diabetes. The evidence for preventing these major killers is just incredibly strong.
Okay, Section 3, minding the nutrient gaps. This is the yes, but of our explainer.
This is where we need to introduce some totally necessary nuance. Look, while plant-based diets are absolutely abundant in highly beneficial unsaturated fats and easily give you plenty of magnesium, vitamin C, iron, and folate, entirely eliminating animal products requires careful, deliberate planning. Strict vegan diets, in particular, are associated with lower intakes of some really critical micronutrients. Vitamin B12, which is vital for a healthy nervous system, is significantly lower in vegans. The same goes for vitamin D, zinc, calcium, and iodine. So if you're shifting entirely away from animal products, you've got to actively monitor these gaps, whether that's through fortified foods, carefully planned meals, or getting adequate sun exposure for that vitamin D.
Which leads us to Section 4, the ultra-processed food trap. Because not all plants are created equal.
This might actually be the most vital takeaway from this whole explainer, because modern diets have a massive blind spot hiding right behind a health halo. Just look at the contrast between a minimally processed whole apple and an imitation plant-based burger. Just because it doesn't contain meat does not automatically mean it's good for you. I mean, think about it. Refined grains, sugary snacks, and completely artificial sodas can all technically be classified as plant-based if they're free from animal products.
The WHO report actually uses the NOVA classification to highlight this danger. They define these as formulations of substances derived from whole foods, often pumped full of added flavors, colors, emulsifiers, and other cosmetic additives. Many of the modern plant-based meats, cheeses, and milks we see today are highly processed. They often pack high amounts of hidden salt and use all those additives just to improve shelf life and make them look appealing.
And here's the kicker. The WHO clearly states that we currently have significant knowledge gaps regarding the long-term health impacts of the food additives and byproducts formed during the industrial processing of these imitation meats. We literally just don't know yet. All right, let's zoom out for Section 5, Planetary and Economic Benefits, the macro view.
The WHO calls this the One Health approach, revealing these amazing cascading benefits from a plant-forward shift. What's on your plate literally impacts the planet. Producing grains, legumes, and fruits generates significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions compared to animal foods. By reducing the amount of land needed for grazing and for growing animal feed, we dramatically reduce global agricultural land use. That directly prevents biodiversity loss, and ultimately, this creates immense financial savings for public healthcare systems around the world. To put a tangible number on that economic burden, the WHO report notes this really shocking figure. In the year 2020 alone, excessive red and processed meat consumption was responsible for 2.4 million deaths worldwide and approximately 240 million euros in healthcare costs. It's incredibly encouraging, though, to realize that reducing our consumption of these meats has a powerful dual benefit, right? It saves human lives and it saves planetary resources at the same time.
Finally, Section 6, How to Make the Shift. Incremental changes.
So how do we actually translate all this dense WHO data into pragmatic everyday advice for your next trip to the grocery store? The overarching goal is simple: plant-forward eating. First, focus on gradual reductions. You absolutely do not have to quit cold turkey. Decreasing your red meat and poultry intakes slowly is far easier to stick with than adopting some highly restrictive diet overnight. Second, prioritize minimally processed foods. Choose whole grains over refined ones, and whole fruits over juices. Third, swap out those sugary, fizzy drinks for water, coffee, or tea. And finally, as we learned earlier, really limit your reliance on those ultra-processed imitation meats. Listen, perfection is definitely not the goal here. The evidence strongly supports that even moderate, incremental substitutions of animal foods with healthful plant foods yield massive benefits. Every single little step you take toward a plant-forward diet is a massive win for human health, animal welfare, and the environment.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Based on the overwhelming evidence from the World Health Organization, you literally hold the power to improve your health and the environment 3 times a day. So what is one small dietary shift you can make this week? Maybe it's swapping out a processed meat snack for a handful of mixed nuts, or simply choosing water over a soda at lunch. Just think about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this clears up the science behind the whole plant-based movement for you.